Oh no, Nation. CJ Wilson here with DoakTalk. Of course, I am your host. Like I told you guys in the previous video, we are in the middle of our pre-spring practice positional breakdown. Spring practice does start tomorrow, March the 19th for FSU. So this will be our last video covering the team prior to spring practice. Just to give you guys, like I said, an overview of each position leading into the practices rather. And of course, we're going to go over my favorite position group today, the second hardest position on football. Well, I'm not gonna go too that far. Let's just say the best athletes on the football field, defensive backs, right? The most fun position on the football field as well, in my opinion, my humble opinion. We'll go ahead and start off with the defensive backs. We'll break it off with cornerbacks and safeties, and then kind of wrap it all up. First, I want to focus on the cornerbacks. The first corner I want to talk about is Quindarius Jones, a junior from Mississippi. Real long corner, standing around 6'2". That's one thing that I will say Patrick Surtain has done a hell of a job of identifying since he's been a defensive back coach at Florida State is long athletic defensive backs that's long with long wingspans and that's athletic as well, that can move very fluid. Long guarded days, pretty much if you're not 6 foot, if you're not a 6 foot corner, then you're pretty much looked at as undersized. If you're anything under 6 foot, you have to be exceptional as far as footwork, ball skills, that type of deal, mirroring, just exceptional type of athlete to play defensive back nowadays. If you're under 5'11", if not, you're considered undersized. That's just the way it is. You have receivers that, 6'4", 6'5" receivers. We always had those type of receivers, but now those 6'4", 6'5" receivers are running 4.3s and 4.4s at 220. So it's a little different now. But again, I think, like I said, Pat Surtain's done a hell of a job of identifying defensive backs. And Quindarius Jones is another one. This kid was a low-ranked 3-star that had offers from like a few, I think Mississippi State, and I'm going to say Ole Miss may have came on late. We identified him, and he's been a very good asset for FSU. Excuse me, he's in line to possibly start this upcoming year for FSU. There's going to be a lot of competition as we lost Fentrell Cypress to the NFL draft, and Azaria Thomas to the NFL draft as well. So it's going to be a lot of competition as far as, the cornerback spot for these guys. It's a lot of talent, but the talent hasn't really been proven as of yet. I think Quindarius needs to take the next step. If you look at how he played last year, I think he was a little bit too handsy in certain situations. If Pat Surtain could keep on developing him and just let him know, hey, you don't have to use your hands or panic rather when you're in a certain phase when covering the defensive back to where you got to grab and use your hands. Let's use your leverage. That'll take care of everything else, because if you look at Quindarius Jones play, he's in position most of the time. Like I said, just has to be a little less handsy moving forward. Jabril Rawls is another cornerback I want to discuss. Like I say, he's a redshirt sophomore from Pensacola, another long, athletic cornerback. He's been a pretty solid backup for FSU the last couple of years. Now it's time to take the next step. Will he be able to take the next step and claim one of the starting cornerback positions and, mold into the defensive back we think he could be? Like I said, if you go back to that, what class it is, 2020, that 2023. Yeah, if you go back to that 2023 defensive back, well, not just to pinpoint them, but 2023 for sure. 2024 is hella good as well. But 2023, FSU identified three-star cornerbacks that have paid dividends for FSU thus far and should pay dividends for FSU moving forward once they get more playing time. Quindarius Jones, Jabril Rawls, and Edwin Joseph, 3 low-ranked defensive backs turn to be stars. So that kind of goes to the point where my point for Pat Surtain with the job he's done at FSU, you have these guys who are, I guess you could say, diamonds in the rough, so to speak, that are becoming gems, and then you have the higher ranked guys within the next class, so I'm going to get to in a second, that he identified as well. So the defensive back room is stacked with talent, just young talent. Moving on, like I stated, I did mention Edwin Joseph within that 2023 defensive back class cycle. And speaking about Edwin Joseph, redshirt sophomore this upcoming year, was a redshirt freshman last year. He was a defensive freshman of the year. He won a defensive freshman of the year award last year. Was a physical presence. He brought that spark to the team. FSU went 2-10, but you couldn't tell with Edwin Joseph's play how passionate he was on the field, the effort he gave, and things like that. It was contagious, and it stood out in the limited reps that he did have. Was a physical presence on special teams and defense. Had a pick against Cal. Had some big plays against the University of Florida. I really think Edwin Joseph could be next up. He's, like I say, he's physical, doesn't mind tackling, doesn't mind getting in the mix. I like what I saw to Edwin Joseph last year. Can he take the next step up and be a leader within the defensive back room, the cornerback room? It remains to be seen, but the sky's the limit for Edwin Joseph, and I really think he's going to have a big impact for FSU within the coming years, to start off with this year with, like I said, the more playing time he will get. Now, this next group I want to talk about is just a group of freshmen that were true freshmen last year that pretty much redshirted this past season. Now it's time for those guys to come in and make their mark a little bit. They were highly rated coming out of high school. Like I just kind of previously stated, a lot of these guys had big P5 offers, some 5 stars and things like that. Now it's time for that highly heralded freshman class to kind of pay dividends. We see it translate to the field. Last year was a redshirt year, get adjusted to the game, the speed of the game, how FSU does things, and get better, get bigger in the weight room. Now it's time to actually now it's time to transfer that potential to actual production. So we'll see if these guys can answer the bell and starts with spring practice and have a hell of a spring practice and kind of, start where they left off last year in regards to their development. Let's put it that way. These guys are Charles Lester III, Kai Bates, Jamari Howard, and Ricky Knight III. Speaking of Charles Lester III, let's go ahead first. He was one of the highly rated cornerbacks within the 2023 cycle, one of the best cornerbacks in the state of Florida. Ended up being out of the University of Georgia, University of Florida, Colorado, and a few others for his services. A lot of potential within Charles Lester. We'll see if he can take that next step. Kai Bates, this is another one, a kid from Orlando, Florida, 6'2", 6'1". Like I said, we have a type within the defensive back room. Ended up flipping him from the University of Tennessee late in the process. Had Tennessee, LSU, Miami, and others that were after his services. Jamari Howard, this is a kid that was highly rated as well, coming out, ended up beating Florida, Miami, Michigan State, and a few others. This kid is legit 6'2", long arms, ran a sub 50 in the 400, so he can run, and he has long arms, and he has height. Some of the things you look for in a defensive back nowadays. He didn't get to play last year because around this time last year during spring practice, he had a season-ending injury. So his red shirt came a little earlier than expected. But let's see if he can bounce back from that injury and get back up to speed. Ricky Knight III is another defensive back we want to watch out for. Again, the South Florida product, red shirt freshman. He'll be looking for playing time as well. Another true freshman cornerback that enrolled early was a late flip for FSU. Patrick Surtain and guys did a hell of a job recruiting him throughout the process. Is Shamar Artnox, the four-star defensive back from Georgia, Carrollton, Georgia, to be exact. He ended up enrolling early, will participate in spring practice. Ended up flipping him for the University of Auburn on signing day, a SEC flip. It's a lot to like about this kid. He has a long frame, which I'm pretty much saying about all these defensive backs, and he's very fluid. Watching him, he had camped at FSU, and his drills were very fluid, in and out of his breaks. But it's eye-popping because he's a legit 6'2" type of kid. So, and the staff has been pretty high on him from what I've been hearing thus far in tour duty and winter workouts and things like that. We'll see if that can translate to the field. I want to continue to see him get bigger and stronger in the weight room. And once he does that, I think the sky's the limit for Shamar Artnox. This kid could be a ball player. All right, let's move on to the safety position. And Mike Norvell did come out during his presser yesterday prior to spring practice and announced that Shyheim Brown and Conrad Hussey will be out during spring practice due to injuries. We'll see how that plays out. They will give other guys time to make plays and get more reps and kind of, I guess you could say, entrench their name within the lineup for this upcoming year. I do think Shyheim Brown is pretty much safe and kind of locked in to be a starter at the safety position. But it would have been a really big spring for Conrad Hussey, as he did kind of have like a sophomore slump. We want to see him bounce back within the new regime with new defensive staff, new safety coach, and things like that. We want to see those guys, see how he pretty much translates within Tony White's defense and being coached up by Evan Cooper. So having him out isn't ideal, but again, it's spring practice, so we could get him back in the summer and going into fall. Earl Little Jr., this is a kid that came to FSU with a lot of hype out of Alabama, but it didn't really translate early on in the season for FSU. Some struggles, played safety, played nickel, was pretty much all over the place a little bit. Kind of got his footing at the end of the season playing the safety position. Made a lot of plays at the safety position. This kid has a lot of athletic ability. He's physical. He's fast, twitch to the ball. And even with Earl, I know a lot of people, I think he was a redshirt freshman last year, if I'm not mistaken, a redshirt sophomore, if I'm not mistaken. But at the same damn time, he was still young. There's a lot of, we want these kids to come in and play right away, this, that, and third. Now looking at, the developmental phase of it, how important that is. Not everybody comes out in year two and just make plays left and right. It's called development for a reason. I say that to say this, excuse me. We try to put too much on these true freshmen out the gate. Well, these young players out the gate. So Earl Little, I really think he started to come around in the second half of the season. It'll be interesting to see how he translates to this new defense in Tony White's scheme. Keaton Kirtland, this is another redshirt sophomore. A lot of young defensive backs that played a lot of football and pretty much took their lumps last year as through a 2-10 season. Now they're trying to flip it back and start giving the lumps out for this upcoming season. And Keaton Kirkland falls within that line. He had some growing pains his redshirt freshman year, but he had a lot of flashes on the field. He's consistent. We'll see if he takes the next step. He typically does the right thing on the field as far as being in the right place at the right time. We'll see if he can take the next step as far as his redshirt sophomore year. More experience, the game slow down. He takes the next step and be a big-time playmaker for FSU. Ashlyn Barker, 6'3", 216-pounder, a redshirt junior. This is an interesting case because I always liked Ashlyn and kind of wondered why he hasn't gotten more reps for FSU due to some injuries and things last year towards the tail end of the season, he got more reps and he kind of flashed. Had an interception against the University of Florida. He's a physical kid. I would like to see how he looks in this defense under Tony White and see if he can earn more reps for this 2025 season. If you're looking at a prototype frame, 6'3", 216, Ashland Barker, he stands out on the field. We'll see if that could translate into this new defense. And we have true freshman Max Redmond from South Florida, Palm Beach. We'll see how he translates coming to FSU. The main thing, like I said, get used to the speed of the game. Understand that it's no longer high school, so this is moving a lot faster. These bullets are flying for real. Want to see him continue to get develop physically with Coach Storms and get mental reps of things that understand the defense, and again get acquainted with how just the speed of the game transitioned from high school to college. FSU is bringing a new defensive back coach, or a new safety coach rather, as Adam Fuller was let go. Evan Cooper is the new safety coach. He was the safety or the defensive back coach at the University of Nebraska prior, and also he coached in the NFL with being the secondary coach for the Carolina Panthers. He's from Miami, Florida, so it's going to be interesting to see how he coaches these guys up. For what I've been hearing, just people talking about, I guess, his Nebraska days and his NFL days. He's a hell of a coach that gets a lot out of his players. So we'll see how that translates with this group. Because I do think we thought we were more so reactionary in Alan Fuller's defense. With this defense of Tony White, I do feel like we're going to be a lot more aggressive. And just speaking about defensive backs in general, Tony White has been very bullish on the defensive backs and what they could do and how athletic they are. I said this on Twitter and things like that numerous of times. I do feel like this is the best defensive back room from a talent standpoint that Tony White has pretty much ever seen during his days of coaching. Guys remember he was a defensive back. Well, not starting defensive backs coach. He was the defensive coordinator at the University of Syracuse prior to leaving Syracuse to going to the University of Nebraska. So he was a DB coach at Nebraska. The defense coordinator at Nebraska and Syracuse. No disrespect to those two programs. It isn't FSU when it comes to defensive backs and type of athlete you can recruit and bring in as a defensive back. And Tony White sees that room, and pretty much every time he talks about it, it's a lot of glowing reviews. So it's going to be interesting to see how Tony White does within his defensive backs. You look at the years, Nebraska, a couple years in Nebraska, a couple years at Syracuse. He's the type of coach that pretty much tailor his defense around the strength of the team, rather. So if you're great on the defensive line, linebackers, safeties, he does things to get those type of playmakers involved to which they can make plays. He let his best playmakers make the plays, long story short. So the defensive backs, they're going to make a lot of plays this upcoming year for Tony White, in my opinion. Probably more plays than we made under Alan Fuller, due to the fact that we were pretty much predictable in our coverage with Alan Fuller. We're running man coverage all the time and things like that. With Tony White, I feel like we're going to mix it up. You're going to get zone pressures, regular zone, along with man and man pressures. You do that, you pretty much keep your the offense and offensive play caller on their toes, and you're not predictable in regards to what type of coverage you're going to be running. So we're going to see how it plays out. It's going to be pretty interesting, but this is a defensive backs leading to the spring practice. As you guys know, FSU, and this is something to kind of take a look at as well, FSU did not take a transfer defensive back out of the portal for the winter period. That tells me a few things. It tells me that FSU is very high on the current defensive backs that they have. Even though they're young, they're very high on the potential, and they want to see how that potential looks in spring practice. And then depending on how these guys look, kind of see if they need to address it within the spring transfer portal window. But in my opinion, the talent is there. It just needs to play some football and get more experience. So we'll see how it plays out. Make sure you guys like this video, subscribe to the channel. This is the final positional breakdown. Next thing you know, we'll be in spring practice, going full tilt, seeing how we'll get in a preview of what the 2025 FSU Seminoles will look like. Like the video, subscribe to the channel. Go Noles.